July 25, 2025, was no ordinary day in Washington, D.C. The city, usually bustling with political activity and the energy of countless government employees, held its breath, sensing something unusual was about to unfold. The air was thick with anticipation, a palpable tension that seemed to hang over the monuments and memorials. The Federal Reserve's usual calm, a symbol of stability and economic prudence, was shattered. The quiet facade of the building, typically a sanctuary from the political storms of the Capitol, was about to be disrupted in a way few could have predicted. It was shattered by the sudden arrival of President Trump's motorcade. The long line of black SUVs, armored vehicles, and flashing lights cut through the serene atmosphere, announcing the arrival of a force that was known for its unconventional approach to governance. This wasn't a scheduled meeting, it was a surprise inspection. A move that sent ripples of unease and speculation throughout the financial and political spheres. The unannounced nature of the visit spoke volumes, hinting at a deeper agenda than mere oversight. Trump, back in the White House, strode into the Mariner S. Eccles building, the imposing headquarters of the Federal Reserve, with a determined look on his face. His presence was immediately felt, a force of personality that could not be ignored. Breaking with the tradition of presidential distance from the Fed, this unspoken rule, designed to protect the Fed's independence from political interference, was now being openly challenged. It was a bold move, one that signaled a shift in the balance of power. The institution's independence is a cornerstone of the U.S. economy, a principle fiercely guarded by generations of policymakers and economists. It ensures that monetary policy decisions are made in the best long-term interests of the nation, free from short-term political pressures. But Trump has never been one for tradition, especially when money and power are at stake. His unconventional approach to governance and his willingness to challenge established norms had already redefined the presidency, and now he was turning his attention to the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, once appointed by Trump and later criticized by him, found himself in an unenviable position. He had to balance his duty to protect the Fed's independence with the need to maintain a working relationship with the President of the United States. Led the tour, attempting to project an air of calm and control despite the extraordinary circumstances. He knew that the eyes of the world were on them, watching to see how this unprecedented encounter would unfold. Their history is fraught with public disagreements, often played out on the national stage, but today's focus was ostensibly on the Fed's massive renovation project, a project that had been years in the making and was now nearing completion. Ostensibly, Trump was there to ensure taxpayer money was spent wisely, a concern he frequently voiced to his supporters. He walked through the construction site, asking questions and examining the details, but his true intentions remained shrouded in speculation. But for those watching, both inside and outside the building, it was clear. This was a public show of authority, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to send a message. The cameras flashed, capturing every handshake, every glance, every subtle gesture. A direct challenge to the Fed's leadership and a signal that the president intended to exert his influence over the central bank, regardless of tradition or precedent. The stakes were high and the potential consequences for the U.S. economy were significant. The air was tense, the usual formality replaced by a sense of confrontation and underlying power struggle. The atmosphere in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife, as everyone present understood the significance of the moment. Trump's presence signaled a new level of scrutiny, a clear message that the Federal Reserve would be under constant observation and subject to the president's direct influence. This was a departure from the past, and it raised concerns about the future of the Fed's independence. For the central bank, an institution that had long been considered above the fray of partisan politics. The visit cast a long shadow over the Federal Reserve, raising questions about its future role in the U.S. economy. Powell faced the delicate task of defending the Fed's decisions, explaining its policies, and reassuring the public that the central bank remained committed to its mission of maintaining price stability and full employment. While hosting a president known for dominating the spotlight and for his willingness to challenge the authority of institutions he perceived as obstacles to his agenda, it was a high-wire act, requiring both political skill and economic expertise. The tour was a media event, with cameras capturing every moment, amplifying the drama, and ensuring that the president's message reached a wide audience. The media played its role, dissecting every detail and speculating on the implications of the visit. Trump used the Fed's headquarters as a backdrop to project fiscal conservatism, emphasizing his commitment to responsible spending and sound economic management. He seized the opportunity to reiterate his economic policies and to frame himself as a champion of the American taxpayer. The visit itself was the message, a political drama unfolding before the nation, a calculated move designed to assert presidential authority and reshape the relationship between the White House and the Federal Reserve. The long-term consequences of this unprecedented encounter remain to be seen. The scene was pure political theater. Trump, in a white hard hat with the presidential seal, played the role of hands-on inspector. He moved with the confidence of a developer, not a guest. Powell, in a business suit, remained composed and measured, explaining the project's complexities. Reporters and cameras followed closely, capturing every gesture and exchange. The Eccles building, usually a sanctuary of quiet deliberation, became a construction zone and media spectacle. Every handshake and glance was scrutinized for meaning. Trump's approach was to appear as a cost-cutting leader, Powell, the careful steward. The stage was set for a fiscal showdown, broadcast to the nation. At the heart of the visit was the $2.5 billion renovation of the Eccles building. The project aimed to modernize the historic structure, replacing outdated systems and improving security. The Fed argued the overhaul was necessary and more cost-effective than ongoing repairs. The price tag, though, made it a political target. For Trump, $2.5 billion symbolized Washington excess. He framed his visit as oversight, using the renovation as a concrete example in his campaign against government waste. The project's scale made it the perfect battleground for a public debate on spending. The tour of the Federal Reserve headquarters climaxed in a half-renovated chamber. Dust sheets hung from the ceiling, and the air was thick with the smell of fresh plaster. The room, intended to showcase progress, instead became the stage for an unexpected drama. Architectural plans were spread out on a large mahogany table, illuminated by the flashing lights of cameras. Reporters jostled for position, eager to capture every detail of the ambitious renovation project. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, but also a hint of unease. Then, in a moment that would be replayed countless times on news networks, Trump turned to Powell. In front of the assembled reporters, he directly challenged the reported cost of the renovation, injecting a dose of controversy into what was intended to be a routine media event. "It's not $2.5 billion, Trump declared, his voice carrying a distinct edge. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on the unfolding confrontation. "It's $3.1 billion, maybe even more than that. That's a $600 million difference, a substantial amount of money that needs to be accounted for." Trump emphasized his point with a sharp gesture. He skillfully cast himself as the vigilant guardian of taxpayer money, a role he often embraced. He accused the Federal Reserve of attempting to conceal cost overruns, painting a picture of fiscal irresponsibility. Powell, known for his measured demeanor, responded calmly, directly correcting the president's assertion. His face remained composed, betraying no hint of the pressure he must have been feeling. "Mr. President," Powell stated, his voice clear and steady, "that figure is not accurate. The approved budget remains at $2.5 billion, as has been consistently reported to Congress and the public." The blunt contradiction, delivered with such unwavering conviction, was a rare and dramatic departure from the usual carefully orchestrated interactions between the White House and the Federal Reserve. Powell wasn't simply defending a number. He was defending the institutional integrity of the Federal Reserve, an institution fiercely protective of its independence and reputation. The exchange quickly escalated into a battle over credibility, a high-stakes showdown where the perception of truth was just as important as the actual construction costs. The assembled reporters, sensing the significance of the moment, captured every nuance, every gesture, every fleeting expression. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Trump, momentarily taken aback by Powell's direct challenge, found himself embroiled in a very public dispute over verifiable facts, a situation he rarely encountered without a swift counter-narrative. The clash transcended the mundane details of a building renovation. It became a referendum on trust, a question of who the public would ultimately believe in this battle of wills. The confrontation drew clear and unmistakable battle lines, pitting the president against the chairman of the Federal Reserve in a way that few could have predicted. It was the president's characteristically bold and assertive claim versus the Fed chair's calm, composed, and fact-based correction, a stark contrast in styles and approaches. The nation, and indeed the world, watched with rapt attention as two of the most powerful figures in the American economy engaged in this unprecedented public disagreement. The stakes were suddenly far greater than the cost of a renovation. They encompassed the credibility of institutions, the stability of the economy, and the very nature of truth in the public sphere. After the clash, both sides rushed to defend their positions. A White House aide insisted the $3.1 billion figure included multiple Fed projects, not just the Eccles renovation. The administration framed this as honest accounting, casting doubt on the Fed's numbers. The Fed countered, clarifying that $2.5 billion was strictly for the Eccles building. They accused the White House of conflating separate projects to create a false impression of overruns. The dispute became a proxy war over credibility and transparency. The Fed positioned itself as the source of reliable data, the White House as the aggressive watchdog. Powell's correction zeroed in on the source of the $600 million discrepancy. He explained the White House had included a separate, already completed Fed office building in its total. "It's like counting the cost of a car you bought years ago as part of a new purchase," Powell told reporters. The analogy made the issue clear. The White House was combining old and new spending to inflate the number. The Fed insisted this was a deliberate misrepresentation. The administration stuck to its higher figure, prioritizing political messaging over accuracy. The standoff highlighted the divide between fact-based accounting and political narrative. Beneath the budget fight was a deeper issue: interest rates. Trump used the renovation dispute to pivot again to his demand for lower rates. He argued lower rates would boost the economy, clashing with the Fed's data-driven approach. By questioning the Fed's fiscal management, Trump aimed to undermine Powell's authority on monetary policy. The renovation became a proxy for a much larger battle over economic direction. The real fight was about control, overspending, and over the levers of the U.S. economy. The world watched, knowing the implications stretched far beyond a construction site. The dispute surrounding the renovation was far more complex than a simple disagreement over budgetary allocations. It delved into the very core of the Federal Reserve's operational philosophy and its relationship with the executive branch. It was fundamentally about the Fed's independence, its ability to function without undue influence from political pressures. This independence is a cornerstone of sound monetary policy. For decades, the central bank has operated with a degree of separation, insulated from the immediate whims of political cycles. This allows them to focus on long-term economic health. They make tough, often unpopular calls based on rigorous analysis of economic data, not on short-term political expediency. Trump's very public challenges to the Fed's policies threatened that long-standing tradition. He appeared to view the Fed as just another agency, subject to presidential direction and control. Economists across the spectrum warned that eroding the Fed's autonomy, chipping away at its independence, could ultimately lead to disastrous, politically motivated decisions that prioritize short-term gains over long-term economic stability and fiscal responsibility. The White House's broad, often optimistic economic projections clashed sharply with the Fed's more cautious and precise accounting, effectively mirroring the larger ongoing struggle between the immediate pressures of political expediency and the long-term considerations of sound economic policy. The entire episode exposed a fundamental philosophical divide at the heart of economic governance. Trump, driven by his political objectives, fundamentally saw the Fed as a tool to be wielded in service of his agenda, while Powell, as the Fed chairman, viewed the institution as a guardian of economic stability, a bulwark against short-sighted political interference. The ultimate outcome of this clash would inevitably shape the future trajectory of U.S. economic policy for years to come, influencing everything from interest rates to inflation targets. The dispute over renovation costs remained unresolved, with both sides sticking to their numbers. The public was left with two competing narratives and growing unease. The real issue became the Fed's credibility and independence. If the president's attacks succeed, the Fed could face new political oversight, alarming most economists. The fight was about more than a building. It was about the future of American economic stability. Powell's calm defense was a masterclass in institutional resilience, but the pressure was mounting. The story of the $2.5 billion renovation became a symbol of deeper battles over power and norms. In today's Washington, even the Fed's independence is no longer guaranteed.